Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. As we're set to deliberate the latest developments with chief focus on the Northern Front, the Islamic Republic of Iran, as well as international dynamics with regard to this war, it's always important to remember how it began. 370 days ago, on October 7th of last year, the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates from the Gaza Strip launched a surprise onslaught on southern Israel, declaring war by perpetrating a massacre, murdering some 1,200 mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping approximately 250 people, including elderly, men, women, children, and infants. 101 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. The subsequent day, on October 8th of last year, Iran essentially joined the war by greenlighting its proxy in Lebanon, Hezbollah, to launch cross-border attacks against Israel. Since then, it launched over 12,000 projectiles towards Israeli territory, and not Hezbollah alone. Additional Iranian proxies from Yemen all the way to Syria and Iraq have also joined the war by launching direct attacks against Israel, as well as Iran proper. Now, with Israel preparing, of course, for a retaliatory strike, I'd like to invite General in Reserve, or Brigadier General in Reserve, Amnon Sofri, formerly the Mossad's Intelligence Directorate Chief, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to ask you particularly about the discussion that was held yesterday between President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu about the anticipated attack against Iran. What can you tell us about it?
As I understand, this conversation focused on two main issues. The first one is how Israel is going to react or respond to the Iranian attack on Israel of 181 missiles that were launched to Israel on October 1st. And the second one is what is going to be the next step in Lebanon? How are we going to advance, and what do we want to achieve? That's my understanding. Now, regarding the first one, I'm not sure that Israel or Prime Minister Netanyahu shared all the information and all the data and all his thoughts with President Biden. I think that more President Biden expressed his ideas about what Israel should do in retaliation with Iran, meaning that we want to attack not the nuclear facilities and not the oil facilities of Iran, but to settle down only with attacking, military targets and maybe military intelligence targets and so on, what we call kind of a soft attack, something that will not drag the Iranians to go into reaction, and that will drag a larger war within the Middle East. Regarding Lebanon, they want to know, I believe, that Israel is going to seize its ground maneuver someday, very near future. And what should be the next step? How are we going to leverage these, what we call military achievements, in order to get some order in Lebanon? And I know that on Saturday, President Biden is going to Berlin to meet Chancellor Schulz, President Macron of France, and the Prime Minister of UK, in order to consult what is going to be the next phase in the Middle East, and how are we going to all of us join hands in order to bring some relaxation to the Middle East and to stop the fighting to some extent.
Indeed. Well, let's now turn to our next panelist, namely Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish, the commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense. It's good to see you, General. I'd like to immediately ask you about the preparations Israel is undergoing. Of course, nobody knows, except for the people within this small group of decision makers, when will the strike occur. Nevertheless, the Iranians are not sitting by. They are traveling to Saudi Arabia, to Qatar, to try and convey, on the one hand, their threats that there will be ramifications if their territories are used to strike the Islamic Republic of Iran, but on the other hand, also trying to alleviate concerns by public statements about so-called growing and improving relations, particularly between Riyadh and Tehran, something that, of course, is directed towards the residents of the Islamic Republic.
Well, indeed, Jonathan, but let me allow myself just to add something to what you've said in the beginning of this show in your statement, that we must remember that at the end of the day, the goals of Israel for this war are not there yet. We still have a way to go. We all understand it. And, it starts with the south part of Israel, with bringing the hostages, with the elimination as much as we can of the Hamas as the ruler of the Gaza Strip, and of course, bringing back the civilians of Israel to the northern part of Israel. So this is something that is continuously in front of us. We're looking at it, we're focusing on it, and we can't remember that we still have a way to go. Of course, with regard to Iran and the way that Israel is preparing itself at the defense, first of all, we really have to say that and to remember that this effort is being done together with the CENTCOM, basically with those United States assets that are in our area. We are collaborating in the, when it comes to the detection part, the alert part, and also the interception part. So this is a jointly effort that if we would be attacked by the Iranian, we would see it probably also something which is happening in the next time we saw it in the past. Israel is prepared, not only, by the way, looking toward Iran, but also looking toward the other proxies. We are looking 360 degrees because it could come from all directions. And this is what Israel is preparing itself from the defensive point of view.
Thank you, General Gavish. Let's now turn to the Kingdom of the Netherlands, where we're joined by Professor Uri Rosenthal, formerly the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. It's good to see you, Uri. General Sofrin was mentioning the anticipated trip of President Joe Biden towards the capital of Germany, namely Berlin, where he's anticipated to meet, of course, as he mentioned, with Chancellor Olaf Scholz and with the President Emmanuel Macron and others. What can you tell us about that? Are we expected to see a deeper expression of the U.S. plus 3 or plus 4, depends how you look at it, with regard to trying to de-escalate once again, as they keep repeatedly stressing, the matters throughout the region?
Well, Jonathan, the guys you mentioned, Scholz, Macron, and Starmer, are all on this de-escalation stance, of course. At the same time, let me say that I heard an ex-chief of the M16 UK intelligence saying that he was wondering why, when it is about the Israeli possible surprise attack, as I understand it from Minister of Defense Gallant, this surprise attack in Iran, why actually all is put into the hands of the Israelis, and not only the United States, but also countries like the UK and France don't understand that what Israel is doing is actually a necessity to see for the interests of the West at large. Let me say that when it is about 2 out of the 3 leaders you mentioned, Emmanuel Macron, on the one hand, wants a ceasefire in Lebanon. On the other hand, he withholds now the arms deliveries to Israel. For Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, he is also under heavy pressure with regard to arms deliveries to Israel. And he has not just symbolic, withdrawn his support for Israel at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. The main point on the European end is that when you talk to people like Scholz, Macron, and Starmer, their first priority is not with the Middle East, although it is now extremely not a matter of choice, but of necessity. At the same time, they are very, very worried about the situation in Ukraine, which is getting worse by the day.
I must say that the remarks by President Emmanuel Macron, in my opinion, are outrageous. The manner in which he conducts his affairs, I mean, the implications of French foreign policy to its activities in Africa and losses in Africa shouldn't reflect to the manner in which he does his affairs also in the Middle East. With that being said, of course, we did see a couple of meetings, interesting meetings, of French officials with Saudi counterparts about bolstering French sales of weaponry to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So there is a little bit of an interesting dynamic there. I wonder to what degree this is trickling down into other holes of power throughout of Europe and the United States in that matter. But let's now turn elsewhere in central Israel, where we're joined by Brigadier General in Reserve Yaron Rosen, formerly the IDF Chief of Cyber Staff, a Israel Air Force commander, and a fighter pilot, among others. Thank you for joining us, General. I'd like to immediately ask you about the strategic outlook. The other day, you were on a panel and you highlighted the necessity to define strategic objectives in order to pursue them. What are Israel's strategic objectives when we're talking about a strike on Iran? Is it merely to deter and to degrade in a retaliatory strike, or is there more to it?
Yeah, I think the bigger narrative that is that Israel is trying to tell from here moving on after quite a success in Lebanon is to reshape the Iranian hegemony, if you will, that is pointing westward. And I think there is a wedge, certainly a very effective wedge that Israel succeeded in doing in the last month or so with all of the offensive, a very sophisticated, fast-moving aerial strategic attack, command and control attack, the ground invasion. All of these together are creating an opportunity that can actually create a very successful wedge in Iran's wider strategy of proxy war. And also Iran fell into its own trap and is also conducting a direct war now. So now Iran has to really weigh its next steps, because conducting a direct war with a country that is 1,000 miles away from you with weakened proxies is something very different. So I think the ultimate goal for Israel is to take advantage of this initial successful wedge. There are many places that Israel may fail, namely the way that the West supports Israel. If the West does not understand the major powers, the United States, France, we just spoke about, and others in Europe, do not understand the importance of this moment, changing completely the power structure in Lebanon. I mean, we did not have this in the last 40 years or so. This is an opportunity that if we do not seize, this is a moment we might save Lebanon from itself and from the Shiite terrorists that took over Lebanon quite a few decades ago. So I think that is the where we are right now. And maybe just to put a question here, again, listening to the questions and to what's going on the strategic level, everybody's talking about de-escalation, but what is the strategic purpose of de-escalation? Why do you want to de-escalate? To de-escalate? No, That's de-escalation is, in my mind, not a strategic purpose. It is something that is meant to serve a purpose, but no one's talking about that. They're just talking about de-escalation from a human standpoint. Let's say the tragedy of war. Of course, everybody's suffering, including Israel. So let's talk about strategic purpose and not about de-escalation as a purpose by itself.
You can't be more right, General Rosen. I think it's a little hypocritical, but nonetheless, I do have to ask a question about this. And General Sofried, maybe you can enlighten us on this. Excuse me. When we're talking about the various demands emanating out of Washington, are they genuine, particularly also, by the way, about the strike in Iran? Are they genuine strategic concerns, or are they politically rooted in the current phase of the elections?
I think it's both. First of all, strategically, they don't want to see any great escalation within the Middle East. That means that they know or understand that if you are going to launch an attack on nuclear facilities, on oil facilities, Iran will have to react. And that means that we are going to be dragged, both of us, into a war that nobody understands when it ends and how it ends, and what will be the consequences, because Iran will not fight alone. It will take all the proxies off from Iraq, from Syria, from Yemen, the Houthis, of course. They all will join forces in order to fight Israel. And Israel is going to get into some mixture that you don't know how it's going to end. That's phase A. Second, they know that if this war is going to go over the Middle East, it has a huge effect on the global world, not only on the Middle East, because it will affect the prices of oil. It will affect economical situation in everywhere, in Europe, in the US, of course, in every other place. And something else that is going to be that the Americans can be dragged without willing to be so into this war as well, because they have boots on the ground in Iraq, in Syria, and they are going to be attacked by these proxies as well. So they're going to be dragged into this war as well. And they don't want that right now. Second, of course, it is related to what is happening now in the United States, the next phase, or the last phase of the election for presidency. Nobody really wants now to be engaged in such a conflict in Israel, in the Middle East, and they want to be focused on the internal issues in order to gain points and to be elected as president. And therefore, they don't want right now a great escalation within the Middle East that will drag the attention out of focus from the elections of presidency to something else.
Indeed. With that being said, I do need to highlight that the United States has continued to bolster its forces in Syria in particular in recent weeks in order to ensure what has been told to me at least, force protection, but the munitions and troops there have also an offensive capacity, so there is also a deterrent element within that context in the event that all hell may break loose, albeit already a regional war, escalatory actions may bring about devastating consequences. But with that being said, Professor Rosenthal, Europe is not seemingly very relevant these days in the Middle East when we're talking about its activities. The glory days of old have diminished, and their major capacity to influence the matters is by trying to influence matters in Washington, which are seemingly taking place time and again. Is this also the reflection of a reality that we're seeing, particularly in the United Nations Security Council, which just had a meeting last night about the state of play in the Middle East, with focus, of course, on the Gaza Strip, seeing the United States alongside Britain and France in particular aligning their positions with regard to what needs to be done, particularly in the matters related to humanitarian efforts?
Yeah, well, when I look at the priorities as far as the Middle East are concerned in the European capitals, it is indeed mainly with what I would consider, in power political terms, a sort of secondary considerations. And it is about humanitarian aid, it is about keeping the money going towards UNRWA, it is about keeping under control as far as possible the enormous pressure from pro-Palestine, but I would easily say pro-Hamas demonstrators in the European capitals. That is what is crossing their mind. Also, of course, because the media are extremely anti-Israel by now. May I add one point, and it is about what Jaron Rosen especially mentioned, but also Amnon Sofrin. When I look at the window of opportunity which is arising for Israel with regard to Iran, and I would say window of opportunity for the West, I would also emphasize emphatically the domestic situation in Iran. Unrest is continuing also on the border regions of Iran. The unrest in the country is enormous. Inflation is rising to 40%. The succession crisis is coming. Khamenei being 85 years old. So for that reason, I would say that both domestically and externally, Iran is actually, from the Israeli angle, for now, a window of opportunity, a policy window, which should be exploited, I would say, to the fullest.
Indeed. Well, that might get you on the blacklist or terrorist list of Iran, Professor Rosenthal, if you weren't already on it.
I am already.
But General Sofrin, I'd like to ask you explicitly with regard to, again, talking strategically, talking in broad terms, how is Israel right now calibrating the escalation dominance ladder, which it's on, leaving, of course, prime targets for a potential retaliation of Iran to an Israeli retaliation in order to make sure that the Iranians are deterred and won't go into adventurism that may cost them their regime?
I think that whoever plans the plans in Israel and, of course, approves them, knows exactly what will be the implications of such an attack. That means that you plan what we call on some stages. Phase A will be kind of attack that will be maybe, I'm not sure, a soft one that will hit some military facilities or Saudi military facilities, or maybe of the Revolutionary Guards or other entities as well. And if Iran is going to react, then we have the second phase, I believe, that is going to be even harder, maybe to attack oil facilities, maybe to attack some nuclear facilities, and so on, because you know that if you go all over from the beginning, it's going to be for a declaration of war. And if you don't want to go into a declaration of war and you want to leave some space for them to deny the damage that has been caused and to be able to contain it, then you have to plan what we call the next phases, presumably that they are going to be, they're going to react somehow on your activities.
General Rosen, same question to you. You have 2 minutes for all of it.
Yeah, I wanna try to guess how the retaliation looks like. From all the reasons that were mentioned here, there are implications on the retaliation itself on the next phase between Israel and Iran. That's one thing. There are implications to the Abrahamic Accords. This is the first time since the signing of the Accords that something is happening to one of the signatories to this accord. And what will happen if one of the members of the Accords retaliates against a country that has attacked it? So now there are dilemmas here for Israel because anything we do has implications for the ones that are signed and for the ones that we want to be signed, namely the KSA. I think that actually I would choose a nuclear facility. And I know it might sound the extreme, but that's what I would choose. And the reason I would choose that is because economic targets have implications that might be perceived wider. The nuclear facilities, we all know, are military facilities. I would choose a specific part of them. This is a very intricate and very sophisticated network of facilities, and one of them should be attacked because it is military, and I think it would send the right signal to Iran that they are completely exposed. That is the only way to call and raise, as we said, in this very, very dangerous poker game that everybody's playing. But that's what Israel has to do right now. It has to call and raise.
Indeed. Well, whatever it is, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant highlighted it will be lethal, precise, and very surprising to the regime. It won't know how and where it came from, as he put it. With that, I'd like to thank General Sofrin, General Rosen, and Professor Rosenthal for all of your very interesting insights. I'd like also to thank General Gavish, whose connection got disrupted during the broadcast. But I'd like also to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next update from here in Jerusalem, wishing you a Shabbat Shalom.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.